Guruve Gauda Chanjaya Darika Etadale Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dhanavad Pranam devotees. So this relates to a discussion that I had on our phone conference the other night, and also some confusion that has arisen in the past regarding understanding liberation and bhakti, the differences and the different levels of a liberated soul, and the nature of the sudurlabha, means very rare nature of the achievement of Braj Bhakti. So many times, because for many people our understanding of liberation has come about through the vehicle or the teachings of Bhakti, we have always associated liberation with pure Bhakti. And we've kind of looked at everything else as really not truly being a state of liberation. Of course, we also have direct quotes of our Srila Prabhupada in his writings about the fall even from, the Sayuja Mukti, right? So I'm going to clarify some of those things, because one is that Srila Prabhupada didn't actually mean people fall from actual Brahmananda, but those who are Mayavadis and are imbued with the apparat of Mayavad, they never actually attain actually Brahman. I'll quote that verse later on and explain it, but I just want to start to go through the various levels of liberated souls, first of all. And also, just like the title mentions, self-interest is something that not only takes place within the material paradigm, but it actually carries over into spiritual pursuit, unless and until a person actually comes in contact with a bhakta and the genesis of pure bhakti is imbued in them. They can maintain an idea of self-interest, even, believe it or not, all the way up into service in the spiritual realm. I'll explain those things also as we go along. But first, let me start to go through the various levels of liberation. So, it's mentioned that obviously the jiva from Anadikal, I've mentioned this many times, is bound to the material energy, because the jiva is of the nature of tatashta swabhav. Tatashta swabhav, as I mentioned before, means they have a marginal nature, which means they can be influenced either by the spiritual energy or by the material energy. So though they are apariyamadastuanyam prakritim vidimeparam, though they are superior to the material energy, the nature of their being tatashta swabhav and not endowed with chit shakti. Chit shakti, swarup shakti, they're synonyms. So sometimes you'll hear them used interchangeably. Because the Bada Jiva is not endowed with swarup shakti, they are able to be overcome by the material energy, even though by ontological arrangement they're superior to the material energy, right? Sometimes this is also phrased as gatana agatana pratyasi shakti, some shakti of Bhagavan that could make what would normally be impossible possible, right? So when the jiva is exerting their self-interest in the material realm through dharma, artha, kam, and moksha, etc., or outside of the paradigm of those things where they may be doing adharmic activity, then gradually at some point, because the nature of the material world is, first of all, it's temporary, it's dualistic, they will become frustrated. So that's expressed, mogasha moga kamano moga gyan vichetasa, right? That all the endeavors of persons who ultimately have self-interest become frustrated in the material world. There's no alignment with the pure nature of the Atma. In the pure nature of the Atma, there is no misery, for instance. there is no birth, old age, disease, and death. So as long as we have to confront those things by the influence of the material energy, there will be a natural discomfort with material energy. And what people are doing is trying to, quote, in their own conception, make the best of a bad bargain, right? And also, one interesting thing about the nature of ahamkara is called matsarya. Matsarya means envy in general. But envy is a very subtle thing. It's not always grossly malicious. Envy also is a very subtle thing that always seeks one's own self-interest over that of others. And that may be a gross manifestation, or that may be a very subtle thing. So what happens is, in the material world, those who are by karma endowed with wealth, influence, etc., they tend to lord it over those who don't have those things, and they maintain a sense of happiness by acknowledging their status above others. Now again, don't think this is all just gross. It's a very subtle thing. It could be gross, but in most cases, it's a very subtle thing, right? And therefore, sometimes they are very moved to philanthropic activity, etc. But all of that feeds the abhiman that I am wealthy, powerful, etc. Right? And Bhagavad Gita says, I'll gain more wealth tomorrow, etc. And associates that actually with asuric bhav. Means like demoniac nature. But it's not always gross. Like I said, it's not gross, malicious behavior. It's just the nature of the ahamkara under those particular conditions, right? So in that way, a person is always pushing for their own self-interest. But because there will come a time in the sojourn in the material world where the frustration will come to a point where one starts to seek an alternative, that this is not working. I'm not finding happiness. I'm not finding fulfillment. Even with all the money, power, wealth, influence, adoration, everything else that could be acquired in the material world, I still have not found fulfillment. So then a person may start to take an interest in alternative ideas. Like there must be something else besides this material world, its material activities, and the entire material paradigm. I've come in contact with spiritual ideas. So they then may take shelter of some particular spiritual path in order to investigate it, but still in pursuit of their own self-interest. Either they want to get free from suffering, right? Bhagavad Gita mentions 4 types of people: those who are in pursuit of wealth, those who are in distress, those who are inquisitive, and those who are Ganicha, means those who have some knowledge. The first 2 categories, those who want wealth and those who are distressed, normally come under the category of those who don't have praptarak samskars in bhakti, means they don't have previous samskars in bhakti. Those who either are inquisitive or Ganicha indicates there's some sukriti fal from previous lives, or actual practice of bhakti from previous lives, which is now re-emerging. So again, the first 2 categories may be those who are in want of wealth or those who are in distress. It doesn't necessarily indicate praptanak samskars. But those who are inquisitive, that inquisitive thrust generally comes from either previously acquired sukriti, especially those who are Ganicha. For the most part, it indicates they were actually practicing bhakti perhaps in a previous life, or some iteration related to bhakti, and now they're returning to the path. At any rate, in many cases, when people do return to the path, or they're beginning their entrance into the path, they may still have a lot of self-interest. I want to be happy. I want to find fulfillment. That fulfillment which was not found in the material arena or in the material paradigm, I will now shift my energy towards searching out that same thing in the spiritual paradigm. In that regard, if you begin to look at various levels of the idea of freedom from material influence, you'll get concepts like, 1, just the absence of misery. And in a desire for the absence of misery, you may get concepts like nirvana. I'm not going to purport to speak entirely on the Buddhist conceptions around nirvana, but I'm speaking to the base idea that the consideration is that if there is no karma, then there is no reactions, then there's no possibility to produce dukkha or misery. Right? That I'm speaking to. But that conception is still filled with self-interest. That if I take to the practice and do the necessary practices, though they may be sacrificial to my desires, my material desires, I will attain a greater self-interest by alleviating all misery in my life by getting rid of karma. Now, Jiva Goswami Pada in Paramatma in the 21 qualities of the Atma, he described that the Atma Chit Ananda Atmaka, that the soul is Chit Ananda Atmaka. Then he goes on to describe that here, Chit Ananda Atmaka means Dukkha Pratyogika. So this word Pratyogi, I've explained before, comes from Nyaya Darshan, right? And it indicates that the Atma, or the soul, is the antithesis. It's the very opposite of misery. So there is no dukkha in the Atma itself. I've explained before that dukkha is a byproduct of the vicarious identification of the Atma with the material energy. Because Asanga Yanyam Purusha, the actual Atma, never actually touches the material energy. It's completely vicarious arrangement. Now, when a person is able to perceive that actually if I'm able to get free from all karmic activity that doesn't produce a reaction, I can become free from misery. So what is experienced is actually dukkha pratyogita, the absence of misery. It does not fully acknowledge the existence of the Atma itself. You understand? It only acknowledges the quality of being free from misery. So this is one view of what is nirvana. Now, those who have the same self-interest to get free from suffering, etc., but practice a different path, perhaps like yoga or jnana, they may come to the realization of the Atma itself. Not just the absence of misery, a quality of the Atma, but the Atma itself, which is endowed with 21 qualities according to Jiva Goswami Pada, 8 virtues according to Chandogya Upanishad. And in that way, they will experience Atma Ananda, the inherent Chitkana bliss, particle of bliss that exists in the very nature of the Atma. So now, something should be clarified here. Simply by the removal of material influence, it does not axiomatically reveal a particular relationship with Krishna. You understand? Because as long as there's self-interest, there is the practice of bhakti is stated. Anya abhilas ita sunya. So anya abhilas sunya, taking the suffix ita, anya abhilas sunya. There should be no other abhilas, desire, except the anukul seva of Krishna. So even when you enter into investigation of the spiritual path, but you're maintaining self-interest for your happiness, then that does not produce the revelation of Sri Krishna, Sri Krishna's abode, etc., etc. It simply rewards the self-interest that you have in the spiritual paradigm. This is the meaning of Yayata Mam Prapajante Tam Statava Bhajamyam. Krishna is rewarding according to your degree of surrender. Surrender here means moving towards Bhagavan. It doesn't mean acquiring Bhagavan necessarily. It means moving towards that direction. He's rewarding everything. To give himself or to reveal himself, it requires Bhakti Shakti. And that's explained as being Sudurlabha, very rare. You understand? So this is one of the things to understand, that Bhakti is not just a matter of removing Maya. We tend to use that parlance in the community of devotees because we're removing the material influence by Bhakti Shakti. This is the meaning of Bhajana Kriya. The Kriya Shakti inherent in Sarup Shakti is being manifest in the Bhajan Sadhan and Kripa of the Bhakti aspirant. That's not the same for every other practice. You understand? So it does not mean that when Maya is removed, the material influence is removed, automatically there's revelation of a particular relationship with Krishna and Brajadam, etc. So I'm going through the various levels of unfoldment and liberation and proving this point. If you want detailed explanation, you can look at Srila Sanatana Goswami Pad's Brihad Bhagavatamrita. I will quote one verse from there, which is especially important because it states how, even in the liberated condition, one can still obtain the service of Sri Krishna in Seva Ananda. So let me get to that point first. So we've discussed Nirvana, we've discussed Atma Ananda. Ananda is not a static phenomenon. We read in Shashastakam, Anandam Buddhivadanam Pratipadam Purna Amrita Swadanam. The nectar of Ananda, though being in context related to Harinam here, is true of Ananda in general. Ananda is an expanding function. The Upanishads also mention Rasam Eva Labdananda Bhavati, that in a liberated condition, the Atma can obtain higher and higher states of Ananda. So, after Atma Ananda, by the nature of the expanse of Ananda, a person may, if they are not imbued, and I'm going to get to this point now about Mayavad, if a person, by the inclination of the growth of Ananda, desires to experience the undifferentiated spiritual vastu, the undifferentiated spiritual substance called Brahman, because that Brahman, Brahmano hi pratishtaham, this is mentioned in Bhagavad Sandarbha, and it quotes the original commentator on Srimad Bhagavatam, Sridhar Swami in Bhavarta Deepika, saying how because the Brahman is the actual effulgence of Krishna's own body, it's imbued with the qualities of bliss that not there in Sevananda, but still those qualities of bliss related to Krishna's root are present in Brahman. They're unrealized in Brahman, but they're present. So an Atma whose desire is for a greater form of bliss may experience Brahma Ananda. Why then would Srila Prabhupada suggest that tasting Brahmananda, someone could fall back into the material world? So here, if you look closely, Srila Prabhupada has quoted one verse which is very important. Ye nevravindakshali mukti maninas, twai ashtabhavat avishuddhabodaya. Those persons who fall back into the material realm are imbued with the fault of Mayavad. What is Mayavad? They assess that the transcendental form of Bhagavan, when it comes in the purview for Leela of the material world, it becomes infused or synthesized with the mode of material goodness, Sattva Gun. Therefore, they ascribe that Maya actually has some influence on the transcendental root of Bhagavan. Because of this inherent aparad, they don't actually obtain Brahmananda. What they obtain, vimukti manina. Manina means like an abhiman, like a conception, I'm liberated. But it is avishuddha budaya. Avishuddha here, I've heard different explanations of this. One explanation is, avishuddha means without vishuddha sattva, means transcendental swarup shakti. You understand? Avishuddha buddhi means the intelligence is not completely purified. You understand? They only believe, vimukta manina, I am liberated. But when there's a desire for a greater experience, because there is a checking of the expansion to Brahmananda due to that aparad, they then fall down again into the material world. Srila Prabhupada has expressed this in Srimad Bhagavatam. He mentions those persons will become philanthropists, philosophers, etc., in the material world. Understand? Those who genuinely obtain Brahmananda, they are tasting Sayuja Mukti. So Sri Baladev Vijabhushan Prabhuji, he's explained that this Sayuja Mukti is not an actual oneness with Bhagavan. It is a perceived oneness with Bhagavan. But it is Sayuj. Yuj, one meaning of Yuj means like yoga, yukta, connected, bound. Right? Like I remember I was searching out one shlok in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prayujamani Mayi Tuam Sudim Bhagavatim Tanum. Narada Muni is explaining to Vyas how he obtained perfection. So always, because I saw this word Prayujamani, I could not realize why it's translated as awarded. Because it would seem on the basis of the word itself, if you look in the Abhidhan, in the Sanskrit dictionary, pra, the prefix, prakrishtarupe, means completely. Yuj means bound or connected. to a spiritual form. That made sense. So why is it translated as awarded? So in Kram Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami is written, unless a person is given mercy by Bhagavan, this could not take place to receive a transcendental form like this. So that's one explanation. Then a very good inspirational person for me, Srila Bhakti Swarup Siddha Maharaj, he showed me what the Sanskrit and the commentary, and we looked, and there was mentioned that one translation for this word, prayujamane, is niyamane. And niyamane means to award. And the reason is because of what Jiva Goswami Pad is saying. Because that could not be done without the kripa of Bhagavan. So though it is an attainment, it happens only by the kripa of Bhagavan. You understand? Like the descent of Swarup Shakti. If one becomes mature in their ruchi, they come to the stage of Ashakti. In the stage of Ashakti, you cannot force the descent of Swarup Shakti. It will happen by the mercy of Bhagavan. You understand? So that point is like a point of waiting. And in that waiting room position, one can have so much lalas, means deep desire, to obtain it. But you have to wait for the kripa of Bhagavan for that Swarup Shakti to descend. You understand? So, those who are very fortunate to actually obtain Brahmananda, it doesn't mean that, as I mentioned before, that Ananda is checked. So now I want to read one verse from Brihad Bhagavatamrita. It comes in the Jnanakan, chapter 2. This is verse 207. So there the verse says, Muktasya Chasyataya Shaktya Satchit Ananda Dehitam Prapitaste Bhajante Tam Tadrisai Karanai Harim. So here, because a doubt has arisen, how is it possible for one who has already obtained Sayuj Mukti, right? How is it possible that they will ever be able to obtain a higher state of Ananda like Sevananda to Bhagavan? Because they have merged into the Brahmajyoti. So, Srila Sanatana Goswami Pad, Digdarshani Tika, he's mentioning, to answer this question, this verse is being quoted. And the verse says, by the influence of the Lord's potency, means the Lord's Shakti, because the verse says there, Taya Shakti, all the liberated persons, they can obtain bodies. Satchidananda Dehitam Prapitas. They can obtain bodies even from Brahman, comprised of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. So now also if you look at Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan Prabhu, he's written also that the idea of Sayuja Mukti is never becoming actually one in full with Bhagavan, but Sayuj, existing along with the undifferentiated energy of Bhagavan, one can have the Abhiman, the conception of being without a particular form, etc., etc., and in that way they're tasting Brahmananda. You understand? So they simply have the idea, I don't have a body, etc., etc. But he gave the example, as vast as the ocean is, if you add one drop to the ocean, it's imperceptible. But in fact, the ocean has increased by one drop. The genius of Baladev Vijayabhushan. Right? It's imperceptible because in an ocean, you cannot perceive the existence of one drop. But in fact, that ocean has increased by one drop. So he's saying in the same way, the jivas doing sayuj to Brahman doesn't indicate that they're no longer individuals. Jiva Goswami Pad also mentions in Paramatma Sandama Prakti Kshetra, every Atma is individual. And Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, this individualized category of the Jiva, is eternal. It never goes away. You cannot merge into Brahman and no longer exist as an Atma. You understand? So now Sanatana Goswami Pad is making the point that therefore from that position of Brahmananda, based on the idea that Ananda is an ever-expanding reality, then it is possible to obtain Satchidananda Dehitam Prapitas, a transcendental form under which Sevananda can then be experienced. Because the question here was, to obtain this kind of bhakti, it should be that one has done some sudden bhajan and received the kripa of a sadhu within this life. And the example is given of Chatusana, 4 Kumaras. And in Leela Shukdev Goswami, coming from the womb of Bitika, in Brahmavad. Their Brahmavad was broken by the influence of Swarup Shakti in the Harikatha and in the association of sadhus. So what happens if you've already given up this body? To answer this question, this verse in Brihad Bhagavatamrita that I've quoted answers that question. You understand? So I've already kind of summarized the purport. No need to go over it. Actually, this Digdashni Tika, because I've kind of summarized it here. That he's answering the question, what happens even when one enters the Brahman, one still can obtain Seva Ananda. So now, another question arises, but wait a minute. To obtain Sayuja Mukti is eternal condition. So how can it be changed? When we think of eternality, we're still, unfortunately, thinking within Prakrit Kal. That means we're thinking of everything in a time frame, according to how we've experienced the world, in past, present, and future. We're just thinking, okay, now it's eternal, it means it's ongoing, ever existing. But the actual understanding of eternality is Nitya Vatmanakal, something which is eternally in the present and cannot be Na-cha Kala Vikramaha, cannot be influenced, according to 2nd Canto Srimad Bhagavatam, it cannot be influenced by Prakrit Kal, means material time. But I was explaining to someone yesterday, in Braj-lila, is there day and night or not? Yes. Is there the passing of months and years? Yes. But are they actually the influence that we experience in Prakrit Kal? No. They are udipans in the Lila of Bhagavan. So the autumn season, that time, is a stimulus. You understand? For us. Right? Sarat Utpalika Malika. Right? It's described there. Bhagavan Pitara 3. Sarat Utpalika Malika. That period of time is described as udipan for us. So time there is a servant to rasa. But it has no influence like it does here, where it creates a past, present, and future, which changes the very vastu, the very substance of what we are. In the spiritual world, that doesn't happen. Everything is situated in the Sandhini Shakti. And that Sandhini Shakti, the substance, spiritual vastu, cannot be influenced by time. Na cha kala vikramaha. So time there only becomes udipan for the Lila of Bhagavan. Understand? So Brahman is also situated in eternality. So the meaning of Sayuja Mukti being eternal is not a reference to a time frame. It's an unbroken condition, now you're stuck and that's it. It's a reference to the fact that Brahman is not situated under the influence of Prakrit Kal. You understand the difference? Hopefully I'm clear. I'm always praying that I'm clear when I'm speaking these things, right? But it's situated in Nityavatmana Kal. So it's situated in spiritual reality, where it's beyond the influence of time. But it doesn't mean that there is no influences of Shakti there. Other than that, Sanatana Goswami Pad cannot quote, Muktas Chasya Tasya Shaktya, by the influence of the Shakti coming in the Brahman. Satchidananda Dehitam Prapitas. That a person can acquire from the nature of being in Sayuj Mukti, can still acquire a transcendental form. You understand? So that means the Shakti of Bhagavan is not inoperative simply in Brahman. And the individual conception, born of self-interest to taste higher and higher experiences for oneself, when by the influence of Bhagavan Shakti, a higher degree of desire for Ananda comes, naturally the only elevation from the point of Brahmananda is Seva Ananda. This gives revelation to Paramatma and eventually to various forms of Bhagavan. You understand? So now the question will come, but okay, what about those who want to stay in Sayuja Mukti? We cannot speak to that dynamic because again, this is outside the realm of material time. So what will be the metric to explain, well, how long were they there and then they decided to become elevated to Sevananda, or does everybody do it? You can't use these kind of metrics now, right? And we can only understand the ontology of the position. That Brahmananda is beyond material time, but in Brahman, there is the possibility, according to Sanatana Goswami Pad in our Mool Grunt, Brihad Bhagavatamrita, the possibility of developing Sevananda. In Sevananda, does it indicate that actual self-interest is then absolutely destroyed? Srila Rupa Goswami makes a very interesting point, and my Guru Pada Padma quotes it in the 4th verse of Manashiksha in his commentary there. Even when a person obtains Sevananda, there are two kinds of mixed self-interest and Bhagavat Seva interest that come about. One is called Shukya Aishwarya Uttra. Shukya Aishwarya Uttra means what is experienced in the four kinds of Salokya, Sarupya, Sarsti, Samipya, four kinds of Vaikuntha liberation. You understand? In those four kinds of liberation, there can be a mixture of the enjoyment of the Aishwarya of being in Vaikuntha. You understand? Shukya Aishwarya Uttra. That there's a mixture of one's own happiness. Oh, I'm in Vaikuntha. I've arrived. And that there's an opportunity to serve Sri Narayan in Vaikuntha is your desire, and it's also your own happiness. Well, Mukunda, isn't that the case with everything? Even if we get to Vrindavan? Rupa Goswami goes on to say, there's also Prem Sev Uttra. He says in this Prem Sev Uttra, there's also the feeling of having arrived even in Braj and having been endowed with the opportunity to have your Ishtadev Shri Krishna in your darshan, to be among the other associates of Vrindavan. Still, there can be some self-interest which is present there. Just like in Dwarkadam, the Mahishis in Dwarka, there is some mixture of self-interest and pure seva to Bhagavan. And in Mathura, we find the ultimate idea of self-interest, which doesn't even classify as actually rati, but it was still fulfilled by Krishna in the form of kubja. So it's described by our acharyas, she has sadharani rati. Means like ordinary. She had lust, but that lust was exclusive to Bhagavan and no one else. And that desire was fulfilled. So she's the epitome of self-interest. You understand? But her feelings can't even be classified as rati or bhakti. You understand? It was her personal self-interest, but because it was exclusively connected to Bhagavan, she received that desire. Of course, there's a backstory with Shurpanakha and everything else, but that pastime shows this point. You understand? Also, those gopis among the Municharis who obtained Braj on the night of Rasa, when Shri Krishna called for Rasa, they were checked by their husbands, fathers, etc. It's explained. Dusraha tivratapa, dusraha viraha tivratapta dushta shubha. Dushta shubh means there was some inauspicious element there. So a question has to arise. Wait a minute. They have obtained Brajadam. What inauspicious element could possibly be there? So here dushta shubh means the conception of Prem Sevutra. I have arrived in Braj. I have an opportunity to love and serve Krishna. I'm experiencing so much happiness for this. You understand? So because of that, it's explained that Jogamaya, she had created duplicates of all the bodies of the gopis. But for those who did not have so much association of Nitya Siddha gopis, no duplicate body was created. So when Krishna called on the night of Sarid Ras, those who had obtained Siddhi, but still had this Abhiman, they were checked by their fathers, husbands, etc. It goes on to say, Dushaha virohi tivra tapta dushta subha dhyana prapta shutta shlesha nivritta shina mangali. But because of the tivra tap means the intense pain of separation that was felt, not being able to obtain the ras, dhyana prapta chutta shlesha nivritta shina mangali. In their hearts, Shri Krishna himself, due to the intense separation, appeared there and they embraced him. Paramatma jara burapi sangata. Even though it appeared like the Antarayami, it was actually the form of Krishna. And prapta chutta shlesha, they embraced him. And in this way, all inauspiciousness that they considered that they had was also destroyed. So now there was only pure sentiment. And then it mentions they obtained Ras either later on in that night of Brahma or in Nitya Golokdam. Understand? So this is called Prem Sevutra. Now, what then is the category category of the highest kind of bhakti in the spiritual world, which then has no self-interest whatsoever. So it's expressed in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Atma sukhe dukhe gopiyo nakare vichar. Krishna shukka manochesta kare vyavyahar. They only have a mood, what is Krishna sukh? Atma sukha dukhi, their own happiness or distress, they don't take any consideration for. You understand? They have no conception of their own happiness or distress. Their only ideal is what will make Krishna happy. You understand? Therefore, when it describes in the elevation of the stages of praying, and it gets to the stage of rag, it describes dukkhamarikam chitte shukhatvena eva rajayate. That whatever dukh is experienced in the aspiration to serve Krishna becomes completely, rajayate here means completely permeated by shukha. And then the examples given by Sri Rupa Goswami Pad, that for any chaste lady, the greatest pain, he gives a couple of examples, but he gives this as the last, the greatest pain is that their chastity will be doubted. You understand? This is the greatest pain. So Jatila and Kutila become the personification of always questioning the chastity of Srimati Radhika. You understand? But Srimati Radhika, even on the even on the possibility that she might meet Krishna, she risked all of this declaration of her being unchaste simply on the possibility she may see Krishna. So she daily takes the risk. You understand? In Madhurya Rasa, there are different categories of things that make the rasa function. Durlabhata, it's very difficult to obtain the association of one's beloved. Nirantara, it is socially forbidden. Prachalamukata, it must always be kept hidden. You understand? So, all of these different circumstances make the nature of Parakya Rasa very, very deep mood of complete absence of anyone's personal consideration or self-interest. Because to take that kind of risk, only possibly to see Krishna, is very, very high class of no self-interest. You understand? Because gopis are declaring, what? Just like Krishna mentions, Napareham nirvaja samyajam vibhuro yasha. Napareham nirvaja samyajam vibhuro yashapi bra. That even if he had the life of Lord Brahma, he would not be able to repay gopis. Why? Ma bhajan durjaya geha shrinkala sambhishta. Because very durjaya, very difficult to give up. They gave up everything, but unlike yeyatam mam prapajante tam satarva bhajamyaham, what can Krishna reciprocate with them? They've taken such a risk. Krishna's not their duly wedded husband. He's not obliged. They don't even have the village relationship like suckers, that there's an obligation in friendship even. Certainly there's an obligation in parental relationship. You're my child. But what do gopis have? The Mahishis in Dwarka, they have, this is my duly wedded husband. They have no claim except their prem itself. Therefore, they are the highest expression of no self-interest. This is why it's quoted by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Understand? So they are the emblems of a kind of love which has absolutely no self-interest. You understand? And the pinnacle of that love is obviously expressed in Madan Bhav, and that's fully expressed in Srimati Radhika. You understand? And therefore, our aspirational goal of Radha Dasyam is seen in the light of following those who are following that mood of being completely anya abhilas sunya, having no other desire. And if that is the modality in practice, how can we then expect in perfection there will be other abhilas for your own self-interest? So I went through all the different iterations of liberation and showed how bhakti is actually superior to all other paths, because it is the only thing which can bring one to the point of absolutely no self-interest. Any other path will be mixed with some self-interest. And even other paths cannot have fruition without some influence or prabhava of bhakti. But rather, bhakti automatically, Gyanayatsu Vairagyam, Gyanacharya Hoitakam, all yog, gyan, everything else is there also as a maidservant to bhakti. You understand? So I wanted to bring up this point. It was part of our discussion on our phone conference last night, and I thought I would make it available in the question and answer forum in order to get this point out. And there are also many things which could be clarified, because even among devotees who are some steeped in our theology, some things are still, you know, sort of okay, especially around Sayuja Mukti, because I know very steeped Vaishnavas who have some question about this thing. So I've gleaned from my Guru Parapadma and what's written here in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, and it would make this yukti here, it means logic also, that because it does not matter what arrangement you have, Dasabuti Hari Eva Nanya Sheva Kadachana, everyone has the substratum in their existence of being Das. You understand? So that doesn't mean axiomatically that everyone has to come to a certain kind of relationship. It simply means the template for relationship with Bhagavan is there. The same thing is meant by Paramatmaika Seshita. The word Seshita means who worships Seshayi or Bhagavan. Understand? So there is that factor, sort of a Gada Samskar, for lack of a better word, of being the Das of Krishna. So when I asked one person about it, he mentioned that, but you could say that even in Sayuja Mukti there's a service going on. But I couldn't fully digest that, because Sayuj Mukti would seem to me to be one of the pinnacle points of self-interest. And therefore, it doesn't seem that there's a broad view of how I'm serving Bhagavan. Now, from the view of Bhagavan, everything is a service because everything has some relation. I was explaining to devotees the other day as well about looking at causation and justification for being anadi bada. Because the ahamkar demands some explanation. Well, how did I come here? And this has given rise to everything from opposidantic ideas of falling from the spiritual world to more compromising ideas like, well, we fell from Tatashta, etc. But no, either one of those is true. Neither one of those. Actually, it's completely explained. Anadi yukta what is this verse? Anadi avidya yuktasha. 11:22:10, I think it is. Anadi avidya yuktasha purushasha vedatmanam. Suto na sambhavanti anya gyanatva gyanado bhavet. This shloka. Right? That we are nadi kal bound. If we're looking from our point of view of self-interest, again, this will be a problem, because we'll be looking, well, why? Why, if the jivas of the Vibhinamsa jivas, Tatashta jivas, are of two categories, why did I get this category? And then I brought up how this brings up the idea, well, I was suffering here. But in the 16th chapter of Jayavadharma, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in a very subtle way, he's giving an impression. Wait a minute, let's take a deeper look at this. First of all, this is also one Leela of Bhagavan, and Bhagavan is Leela Mahi. He has many Leelas. Why should this Leela be ignored? Meaning the Srishti Leela, and also the various Leela avatars that descend into Srishti Leela in order to perform activities, which are directly described in 10th Canto Bhagavatam, Anugrahaya Bhaktanam Manushinam Dehinamastita. That those who are bound jivas, when Bhagavan descends in these various Leela avatars, they have the chance of hearing these Leelas from high class of sadhus, and they can become unbound by that. You understand? So he's saying that we should not look from our personal self-interest. Oh, why did I come to this world and I'm suffering, and quote, the Nityasiddha devotees are not suffering. And then we had to analyze what is suffering, because really the Atma is dukkha pratiyogitva, and Bhagavan's external energy is his own Shakti. Therefore, there's no suffering in the Shakti itself and no suffering in the Atma. Where's suffering coming from? Oh, it's coming from the vicarious identification of the Atma with material energy. Like oil and water, those two things don't mix, and all the different difficulties are arising from that. So really, dukkha is a perception on the part of the jiva who is falsely identifying with the material energy. You understand? Other than that, this is also one Leela of Bhagavan. This is explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita, I quoted the other day. Swangsha Vibhinamsa Rupahan Vistar Ananta Vaikunte Brahmananda Karain Vihar. Bhagavan is performing vihara, pastimes in the Ananta Vaikuntha, unlimited Vaikuntha planets. Right? And also Brahmanandas, means in all the material universes as well, through various Leela avatars. So we have to give up self-interest. This is the actual meaning of the verse, Anya Abhilasita Sunya. Right? You cannot be desireless. And also we cannot try to make a program, all right, I'm going to get rid of every other desire. We will become Anya Abhilas when the sweetness of Sri Krishna's seva becomes prominent. Then that desire becomes so prominent, it removes all other desires in deference to itself. You understand? This is described that even when Swarup Shakti descends, Avebhuya Manovrito Vijayate Tatswarupatam Swayam Prakasha Rupopi Basamana Prakashavat. Maybe 2 or 3 verses after description of Sudasattva Viseshat Mahaprem Shri Hamsa Samyabha. After that, maybe 2 or 3 verses later in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami Pad describes the functions that happen when Swarup Shakti comes. It takes over the chitta completely. And in taking over the chitta completely, Swayam Prakash itself reveals itself. Basamana Prakashavat means it appears like it came from the jiva, but actually it's Swayam Prakash. It is self-revealing. Bhakti Sanjatya Bhakti. Bhakti is coming from Bhakti. Right? The jiva becomes the recipient of the kripa of Bhakti Shakti, and it manifests on their chitta. And that time it also becomes Swayam Ashwada, means self-tasting. And it becomes the cause of tasting service to Bhagavan, and Bhagavan tasting the devotees' seva vritti. Alright, so hopefully this was somewhat helpful. Okay. Thank all the devotees who had come on here. I think I also saw many devotees come on. Okay, I can't see all who came on now. I want to thank everyone. I see Vrishni Ramana Devi and so forth. Okay. All right. My Dandavat Pranam. Vanchakal Paturvyascha Kripashindavevacha Patitanam Pavanivyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Radhe. Oh! I saw Sundar Gopal Prabhu came on. Oh! Very auspicious. Very auspicious. Because then if there's any correction to be made here, he'll be able to make it. Very good. I'm very happy. And Prabhuji, I'm begging you, give me your mercy as well as all devotees. Jai Haribo. Radhe Radhe.